A pledge to work together on climate change and the green economy. New Zealand's Prime Minister is in town to build on an enhanced partnership. And for more on relations between Singapore and New Zealand, we're joined by Dr. Jayant Menon. He's visiting senior fellow at ISEAS Yusof Ishak Institute. Dr. Menon, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern making Singapore her first stop to begin her overseas trip, the first one she's made in more than 2 years. How is this significant?
I think, firstly, we shouldn't be surprised that Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has chosen Singapore to make her first trip overseas. For New Zealand, Singapore is the fifth largest trading partner and also the largest in this region, the Southeast Asian region. So there's an obvious reason to start with Singapore, but there's also a long historical link between the two countries, back to the Pacific Four, or P4, that eventually expanded into the CPTPP now. And they also have many other agreements in place. There is the Enhanced Partnership Agreement, there's a Digital Economic Partnership Agreement, and there are various regional FTAs as well. So it's important, and it's no surprise that she should start in Singapore.
Dr. Menon, you talk about the enhanced partnership. Now, a new pillar has been added to that, and that is, of course, the climate change and green economy. How does this new pillar complement existing pillars in the Singapore-New Zealand enhanced partnership?
Right. So climate change, as we are often told, is the existential challenge of our time. I think this is very true. But it's a cross-cutting issue. By that, I mean that it affects many things, and especially the other pillars in this enhanced partnership. But not only that, the way in which those pillars are pursued will also affect the climate change outcome. So the complementarities are very clear and very real. So including it actually makes very good sense. But I think another important aspect here is that both Singapore and New Zealand have been quite aggressive in pushing the climate change agenda. So they have that in common. And interestingly, New Zealand's most important partner, Australia, has taken a rather weak and disappointing position on this issue. And this was very clear during the Paris negotiations.
Dr. Menon, if the pandemic has reminded us of anything, and that's the vulnerability of our supply chains. So this meeting, a supply chain working group, is also set to be established. How vital is this in a time of clear disruption and vulnerability? Do you see it expanding to include other regional partners?
Yeah, right. So for New Zealand and Singapore, very heavily trade-dependent economies, an efficient functioning supply chain network is critical. And I think there's two dimensions to this being raised now. The first is, to reduce vulnerability by increasing the digitalization of supply chains. This again comes back to that Digital Economic Partnership Agreement that I mentioned. This already includes Chile, but it can be easily expanded to include other countries in this region. The second is, I think, the need to guard against the rise in protectionism or the rise in anti-globalization sentiment, which has increased with the pandemic. There have been increasing calls for reshoring of supply chains or returning them to home countries. And this is the pretext, apparently, to reduce vulnerability. This is not true. This is another way of actually pursuing protectionism. And countries like Singapore and New Zealand will both suffer if this happens.
Right, of course. At the back of our minds these days, we've got what's happening in Ukraine. Of course, Singapore making a clear stand on that particular issue. So drawing attention to what it is to be a small island nation in times like these. How important is it for both New Zealand and Singapore to align their interests? And what value does this kind of alignment bring to the region?
Right. Yeah. So I think, the interests of small countries like Singapore and New Zealand are best served by a well-functioning rules-based order. And the Ukraine crisis simply exemplifies that point. To put it slightly differently, small countries stand to lose the most when a rules-based order is compromised, as we're seeing this happen in Europe. And so I think this is critical at this stage, but we need to also bring in middle powers, I think, because they have also much to gain from a rules-based system. And it's important that they all align to try and secure their interests. So this is a timely reminder of the importance of a well-functioning rules-based order when multilateralism as a whole is under threat.
Well, thanks very much indeed. Dr. Jayant Menon, visiting senior fellow at ISEAS Yusof Ishak Institute.